Now, Premier League clubs, as we've mentioned, signed 12 players on deadline day. They spent over £1.2 billion during this window. Sports lawyer Daniel Geey joins us live now to reflect on all of this. Daniel, thanks so much for coming on and talking to us about this situation. Are you surprised by how much money has been spent in the Premier League over the course of the window?
Well, if we go back to basics as usual, the broadcasting monies that are on offer, especially from Sky, to be able to broadcast all of these games, do give Premier League clubs an awful lot of comfort in terms of their cost base. So obviously we have had a huge COVID pandemic that continues in force. But the riches on offer to be able to play in the Premier League, to stay in the Premier League, and then not to be relegated, mean that clubs continually are having to invest. We only need to look at the last few windows and last few years, rather. 1.3 billion spent in this window 1.4 rather this window last year, and then 1.3 the year before. So there are significant amounts still being paid, especially in the summer window, and especially whilst the season has now started and reinforcements might be needed.
But when you compare it to the rest of Europe, though, Daniel, I mean, you look at Real Madrid, for example, they didn't sign a player during this window. So the first time in 40 years they haven't signed a player in the summer window. Why is it so different here in England?
Well, you're absolutely right. The Premier League is very much the exception to the rule. If you look across the other big leagues, the only league whose clubs had a net transfer expenditure was actually Serie A. Bundesliga, Liga and others actually almost came out at a net position. Now, it might be that there are specific clubs with specific reasons. Clubs like Real Madrid and Barcelona have come out for a while and said their commercial revenues have been significantly impacted, especially on the commercial and matchday front. It may also be that clubs are looking to try and reduce their wage bill for lots of different reasons, for strategic reasons for future windows to come. So it's difficult to second guess particular clubs, but the strategy overall, the overarching environment has certainly been more of a spendthrift window across the continent.
We saw Arsenal yesterday do the biggest deal of the day. They paid the release clause for Thomas Partey of Atletico Madrid. We always see these release clauses in Spain, don't we? Every player's got one. It doesn't seem to happen quite so much in England. Why do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, there's different terminology that is always used regarding buyout clauses, release clauses, etc. And in Spain, it is part of the contractual regulatory framework for there to effectively be a buyout clause, which is beyond the control then of the selling club. Whereas in the UK and in England, for example, there are more likely to be release clauses set at particular amounts. Now, again, there are nuances of what a release clause might be, whether it's an automatic clause, whether it's conditional or dependent, but for particular Spanish clubs and particular Spanish instances, that can certainly be the case. So Arsenal almost took the negotiation beyond the control of Atletico, went straight to the league to deposit the buyout number and then negotiate that wage discussion with the actual player, and that can effectively lead to a slightly more straightforward negotiation. And you have to look at Sancho potentially to Manchester United to see the difficulties in trying to agree a transfer fee and then get a deal over the line.
Yeah, that certainly was one that Manchester United struggled with. But before I ask you again about Sancho, Thiago Alcantara came to Liverpool. That was another one of the big deals that did go through over the window. It looks like Liverpool are going to pay around £5 million a year over 4 years. Is that type of payment structure going to become more common?
Well, to be fair, and as I sort of mentioned in the book I wrote a while back, those type of agreements between clubs are relatively common. So instalments payable over a particular period of time are common. Always the question mark is about what percentage of those instalments are paid at the beginning of the deal or afterwards. So that can be one thing that needs to be borne in mind.